Today, we are going to look at a snapshot of Jesus that tells us just how powerful he really is. Because in this situation, in our story today from John chapter 11, we see a family in need of help. And we see a crowd of people in need of faith. And a very powerful God-man who could handle both situations simultaneously. So let's pick it up at the beginning of John chapter 11. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. And we read that Jesus had a history with his family. He knew them. He cared for them. They were part of his discipleship group. And so whenever they sent word to Jesus, they wanted him to do something about this. The sisters sent word to Jesus saying, "The Lord, the one that you love, is ill." This is what Jesus did. He said, "This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." He said, "This sickness is not the sickness that leads to death." Now, Jesus, I don't know if they would have just sent for you if Lazarus had the sniffles. Lazarus probably got a bad diagnosis. It wasn't looking good. And they said, "We know Jesus is an important, busy man, but you better send for him. This isn't looking good for someone that he loves, for Lazarus. Send for him and bring him if he can come." And Jesus is saying, this illness does not lead to death. Because there is an illness that does lead to death, an eternal death. That's a sin sickness. There may be some physical illnesses that lead to falling asleep, but through Jesus Christ, death does not have the final say. Paul was a church leader. After the resurrection, he wrote a letter to some people in Thessalonica. We call it the first letter that we have to the Thessalonians. And they were worried. They were saying, "We've been following Jesus, and we've been waiting for him to come back, but some of us have died. What do? They died before Jesus came back. Are they not going to get their reward?" And Paul tells them not to worry. He says, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep." Is my pen working? I didn't write that they fell asleep. Maybe Paul got the wrong letter or getting them mixed up. I'm saying they died. And Paul's saying, "No, I'm telling you, you need to be informed about what real death is. Real death is not of the body, it's of the soul." So those people have fallen asleep. Because we don't want you to grieve as others who have no hope. Paul calls the physical death a nap. Where did he get that idea? Well, actually, he got that idea from Jesus. From our chapter today. After saying these things, Jesus said to them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him." Jesus says, "Our friend Lazarus is only mostly dead." Not all dead, like the great philosopher Miracle Max in the documentary The Princess Bride says, with all dead, there's only one thing you can do. You go through their clothes and look for loose change. Jesus is saying this person has only fallen asleep. Maybe today there are some people here who need a new definition of what dead is. That is not the body. Real death is not whenever your body doesn't have a pulse. It's when your soul doesn't have Jesus. So yeah, it's a serious situation. But Jesus is saying, don't put a period where I put a comma. Because the period is the end. And you're in a situation that's really just a comma. And if you stop at that comma, and you say, "Jesus, I don't think you understand how serious this is," Jesus says, "No, I can put a tail on that, and it's not the end. Trust me, you want to get to the end of the story, because at the end of the story, there's an exclamation point. There's shouting. There's rejoicing. But if you stay in fear on this side over here, you're going to miss out on the beautiful gift and every ministry that he came to give for you. Please do not live on the wrong side of the comma. Join us one day in a beautiful exclamation point. But man, we like to have that whole thing on our timing, right? We like to have that on our timetable. Jesus, I'm a little busy next week, so if you could perform my miracle now, please. If we could do everything on my terms, I would be very grateful. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, this is how much he loved them. He stayed 2 days longer where he was. Well, we already got the Airbnb, so we might as well just stick around here for a couple more days. We already paid for it. Why did Jesus stay where he was? That doesn't seem like the actions of somebody, the people in need, to stay where he is. That's actually the most loving thing that he could do, and Jesus is quite clear about why he stays. Lazarus has died, and for your sake, I'm glad that I was not there, because I'm about to do something that's going to rock your socks. Now, that's the Eric Revised Version. That's not actually in the... But I'm going to do something that will make you believe. Let us go to him. Jesus doubles down on why he stays and says, it's not a mistake that I stayed here. It's a plan that I stayed here. It was good for you, for me to wait here. You've seen me heal people, but you're still not getting it. You're still not getting the real reason why I came here. I came to bring life. So whenever Jesus pauses, when he has a different timetable than you and I have, do not assume that he is not good. Do not assume that he has abandoned you. Don't assume that he's in heaven going, oh, gee golly, I'm kind of making it up as I go along. I wonder what the next step is going to be. God has his ways. God has his thoughts. God has his plans. Isaiah was an Old Testament prophet. And God told Isaiah, hey, I need you to tell this to the people of Israel because they're kind of thinking that I'm going to be in their little box and do things their way. And he says, tell them this, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and your ways are not my ways, declares the Lord. And that's a very, very beautiful sentence, because I don't know about you, but I know some of my thoughts and I know some of my ways, and I don't need God to have some of those. In fact, I need God to be bigger than me. I need God to see something that I can't see. I need God to have his vision. So I need to trust. It's easy to trust God when all of his ways are going your ways. Faith comes into play when it's not going your way, when you can't see it, when you have to trust him and his really big perspective. Otherwise, you have a God that's smaller than your brain. If you only trust and worship God when his ways are going your way, you're not worshiping him, you're worshiping yourself. I'm sorry if it feels like I'm stepping on your toes. I was kind of aiming for your gut. Jesus didn't just defend his timing with his disciples, because he shows up to the funeral and everybody knows that he could have been there in time. And so they go to him and they ask him, like, what's going on? They have this conversation with him. Martha says to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give to you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Do you see what she did there? She went from over here saying, I know that you could have done something if you had been here. Jesus says, I'll tell you exactly what I'm going to do. And she goes all the way into the future. She goes into, I know, someday, I've got faith. She believed that Jesus could have done something, and she believed that Jesus will do something. But do you believe that Jesus can do something today? Do you believe that Jesus can do something in your life right now? It takes faith to say, if only you had been here. And her sister echoes this. She comes to where Jesus was and saw him. She fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You could heal from a distance. We sent for you because we loved you, and you know that you loved us. And there are two sides in some of our minds today. It's either that if God had been in our past, he could have done something. But I have a question. If you're thinking about something that happened in your past and you say, I prayed about it, I prayed, and if Jesus had only been there, something could have happened, I want to know what Bible you're reading. Because my Bible says that there's no place in heaven and on earth or under the earth that can escape God. That He is with me. That when I look up to the heavens, I lift my eyes, and my help comes from the hills. And when I'm in the valley, that's where my shepherd is with me. And let's just say that there's some giant river in the way. I can see how He can part the waters. One could almost say, there ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough to keep Him from getting to you, babe. My Bible says that He will never leave us or forsake us. So whenever you come back to the situation and say, Jesus, if only you'd been here, I need you to hear this. Some of you are carrying it. Don't carry it. Because we say, Jesus, if only you'd been here, and He says, where do you think I was? I'm with you. It may be an actual waiting room. He is waiting with you in the pain. Oh, but we don't like that. We don't like waiting. Over the course of a lifetime, the average person spends 43 days on hold on the phone. That's a whole lot of bad elevator music in your ears. So please listen to this. Put this in your ears. Jesus is on hold with you. He's waiting for you. And yes, He does have a plan for you, and it's a beautiful plan, but He wants to bring about that plan in your life today. It doesn't matter if you've had a bad few days, if you've had a bad few years, or if you think, since I was born in adversity. I've never known a good life. Let me introduce you to a good God who wants to bring about a new thing in your life today. If you wait, and you wait upon the Lord, my Bible says He will renew your strength, and you will rise. Yes, someday, but He came that you may have life today. So don't go, if only Jesus was in my past, or I believe Jesus will be in the future. Believe that Jesus is with you and wants to be with you right here, right now, today. Not just someday, because let me tell you, whenever you get resurrected, and we got water right now, we can do that today. Whenever you make that decision, that is someday. That is some kind of day. Not just someday, but today. And so whenever Jesus hears, I believe in the resurrection, Jesus says, that means you believe in me. You believe today, because I am that day. And in John chapter 11, again, we pick it up. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? In those 4 words, do you believe this? Or in the King James, dost thou believe these? Everybody has to wrestle with these words before you leave here today. Because if you believe that He is the resurrection and that He can bring about a new life, that should change everything about what you do after you leave this place. That changes the way you spend your time. That changes the way you love your families. That changes the way you spend your energies. Everything revolves around the resurrection. He has resurrection power for any mistake in your past, any relationship troubles you're going through in the present, and He has resurrection power for your eternal future. Do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and He can bring about a resurrection today? Do you trust His power, and do you trust His timing? Let's pick it back up in John 11. Jesus tells them to move the stone. So deeply moved, He comes to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus says, take away the stone. And Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to Him, Lord, by this time there will be an odor. Again, King James, He stinketh. There will be an odor because He's been dead for 4 days. And Jesus said to her, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? I've got a question. If she knew what Jesus was going to do, would she argue? If she really believed in the power, it's like, I'm going to resurrect your brother. Nah, you know what? Let's just, we've already had the funeral. Let's leave him. She wouldn't have argued. She would have rolled that stone away. Why did Jesus ask them to do it? Was He not powerful enough? He's powerful enough to raise the dead but not move a stone. He could have done like a Jedi thing where He just lifted His hand and rolled the stone back and everybody would have been in awe. Why did he ask them? Whenever Jesus performed healings, one blind man came to him and he said, "Do you believe that I can do this?" And it was after the blind man said yes, he said, I like your faith. Let's do this. To another blind man, he said, "What would you like for me to do for you?" "I don't know, Jesus. Got a bad haircut. Hoping you can fix it." I want to see. When you tell Jesus what you want him to do, that takes a level of faith, saying, "I believe that you can do what I'm about to ask of you." And Jesus invites you to participate, not to save yourself. You can't save yourself any more than a dead person in a morgue can make themselves breathe again. But he invites you to participate and show your faith, which is belief in action. To show your faith and say, "Why don't you roll that stone away? Why don't you participate and watch me bring the power?" But your faith absolutely matters, because without faith it is impossible to please God. They were worried about the smell. Tell you what, Jesus, why don't we just wash the outside of the tomb? Could we do that? Let's just make it really clean on the outside. Maybe throw some more potpourri, some more spices. Let's just decorate it and make it look really nice, because inside is really bad. And Jesus says, "Do you know why I came to earth? I came to earth for the inside." And some of us today may have some stones rolled over our lives, and we're saying, "Jesus, you don't want me to roll that back, because if I roll that back, it's going to be a mess." And Jesus is like, "I'm not worried about the smell. I'm worried about the death, and I can fix the smell when I fix your death." We need to say, "I believe that whenever I pull back parts of my life, when I open myself up to Jesus, and I invite him in to do his work, whenever I roll back that stone, he's not going to go, 'Oh, never mind, you're the only person in the history of the world that smells so bad I can't do anything.'" He will not run from you, because that smell is exactly the reason why he left heaven to come down to earth for you. So maybe we need to start opening up our lives and saying, "Jesus, I need a resurrection today. There are some smells that are starting to leak out of my life, and I've been trying to cover them up, and I'm starting to run out of stones that can cover this whole thing up. What I need is for you to come in and clean out the inside, instead of just looking good on the outside." So Jesus then prays. He prays a very public prayer to his Father, and he even says, "Lord, I know you hear me. Father, you hear me, but these people need to hear you hear me. They need to see our relationship. They need to see the power that I'm about to do." And he calls out. When Jesus said this prayer, he cried out with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And the man who had died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Now listen, only rich people were buried in their own tombs back then. Most of the time it was like, "Hey, could we have sort of a family grave, cave?" Or like a friends and family, kind of a neighborhood. They were all kind of buried together, and then they would, after a while, come back, stack the bones in a box, and make room for the next body. So it's entirely possible that this is a whole group of people in the cave, and Jesus has to specifically say Lazarus, because if he just says, "Hey, come out," it's like all the oxen free, and the dry bones start coming together, and everybody's coming out. How beautiful is it that Jesus knows the name of the person who needs a resurrection that day? He knows your name. He knows who needs new life. Do you hear him? If you hear his voice calling your name today, don't harden your heart like a stone that's covering it up. Don't harden your heart. Wake up. Because right now you're just asleep. You're not dead yet. You're just asleep. So wake up and let Christ's light shine on you. If you hear him call your voice today, listen to him and rise from the dead. Because we call on the only name who has the power to call out any name. We call the only name who calls out any name. He's the only name given to us under heaven by which we must be saved. And I'm willing to bet that there's somebody in here today who needs a resurrection. I'm willing to bet that because everybody in here needs a resurrection. You need to start living like he raised you up. Maybe you need to start trusting his timing. maybe, I like that phrase, take the grave clothes off of him. Take the grave clothes off of him. So Lazarus comes out, and he's still bound, and he's muffled up, and Jesus says he's not a dead man anymore. He doesn't need to dress like a dead person. Now, there are some very finely dressed people here today. Go ahead and turn to your neighbor and say, you dressed nice today. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now I'll turn back to them and say, thank you. Very good. Okay. Don't let all of the nice Easter dressings fool you, because there are still some people who are dressed like dead people. And what they need is they need to have Jesus resurrect them, bring them new life. So why don't we today call on the name of the Lord? Trust his timing, trust his plan. Find somebody who brought you. I don't care if they dragged you here kicking and screaming, or you just came for the wonderful scones and bagels and breakfast that we had. Whatever brought you here, would you leave here with what really matters in your life? The resurrection that only Jesus can provide. Will you stand as we continue to worship our Savior today?